So, last talk of the conference. Hopefully your stomachs aren't all growling so much that you can pay attention for a little bit longer and give you some value. So, just to give you a quick sort of notion of what RJ Metrics is, we're a cloud-based SaaS platform that takes in your data from every source under the sun that you could possibly think of, and transforms it, basically runs the ETL process on top of it, and then allows you to do analysis, dashboarding, reporting, et cetera, on top of it. It's all automated, so once you get started, you're good to go. And we work with primarily e-commerce businesses, SaaS companies, and mobile businesses. So folks like No More Rack, Threadless, Hootsuite, Chubbies, you name it. And not so much from the perspective of, taking a look at RJ, but just so you understand my perspective going into this talk is that all of your data sources have got to be part of what you're looking at in order to make the decisions that you all are tasked with making. So over the past few days, it's been great because when we've been listening to these talks about high converting landing pages or mobile optimization, which I got to learn a ton on, which was super fun for me, and also how to mine your Google Analytics, what I was so excited about was that unbeknownst to me, we all had some version, or many of us had some version of this fill-in-the-blank Mad Lib, right? And how important hypotheses are to driving what you guys are doing. But I think what I want you to take away from this talk is that it's not just about conversion. If you're focusing on conversion as a KPI, then my worry is you're going down a rabbit hole. You might wonder what the heck this bug in this hole are, but when I asked my team to come up with a slide that illustrated a rabbit going down a hole, apparently there's nothing very good out there from an image perspective that's not copyrighted. So somehow I got a bug and a hole, but to illustrate that if you optimize for your conversion rate, what you're really doing is you're optimizing for a local maxima while losing perspective of your entire business. And Lucas and I had a couple of chances to talk over these past couple of days, and it's really just about, you really ought to be focusing on revenue. Revenue is what it's all about. I would even go one step further to say that it's not just revenue, it's profit, right? And so then the question becomes, what data should you use? And a lot of what we've talked about over the past couple of days has been web data, Google Analytics, or if you've got it, Omniture, or your Optimizely data, all this data that kind of comes from your web traffic. And I think that's not enough. I think that you guys all have far more data in your hands that you can be using to do your job of maximizing your conversion KPI, but really about growing your revenue in a much better way. And so today we're going to talk about some of that data that you should use, and it's not really a monumental task that you've got to take on, but when you're looking at all the data, not just the data for the conversions, but for inventory data, profit data, all of that, what you really need to be doing is thinking about data from the entire organization. And so today we're going to talk about a few things that involve how do you enable data-driven, hypothesis-generating people across the entire organization that are talking to each other. And so we've got 3 principles of successful data workflows. Number 1, tell a story with your metrics. I love that Brian this morning was talking about telling a story. Your metrics have to tell a story. How many of you guys, so many of you in the Family Feud said that you, I forget what the question was, but it was like, what do you do in the morning? Maybe it's what does an optimizer do in the morning? And I think a lot of you said you check your test data, right? That's not what our companies that are, some of the fastest growing companies in e-commerce and SaaS are doing. They're looking at their revenue, they're looking at their profit, and then they go from there on a daily basis. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. I want you guys to be analyzing horizontally across the entire business, but executing vertically. We'll talk a bit about that. And finally, you got to train your question askers. How many people in this audience consider themselves on the business side? Okay. And how many people consider themselves on the analyst side or the data side? Good answer, Lucas. Okay. So very often what happens, there's these idealized notions of what organizations should look like, and I think Lucas could probably talk about that quite a bit. But A lot of the companies that we talk to actually still have like a marketing department that's executing on marketing, and then, an analytics team that's executing on analytics. And if the partnership, if that even in any way resonates with the way that your organizations or your services are set up, you've got to be able to train the question askers and train the question answerers. It really should be both sides of that. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So first, in terms of telling a story with your data, if you look at this dashboard, you can see that, is there a pointer on here? I don't know. Okay, so at the top is revenue, goal versus actual, right? So this is what a lot of our companies start out their day looking at. First of all, they have goals. How many of you guys have goals for your business? Good, all right. How many of you guys are measuring against that goal on a daily or weekly basis? So not everybody that has goals. So a lot of our customers, what they do is they look at their goal versus actual for revenue, but then they break it down, right? So if everybody's oriented towards that top line goal of revenue, then what makes up that? And honestly, that does vary from company to company, but for your average e-commerce shop, that's about new revenue versus repeat revenue, and then you break that down. Revenue from new customers versus repeat customers, your AOV, your conversion rates, et cetera. But if you start at that top and you work your way down, you avoid what I believe a lot of you guys probably have, which is data pollution, right? So the person who's working on optimizing conversion rate has their own notion of which orders count. And then the person that's like running the financial metrics and worrying about like the company numbers has their own notion of which orders count. And those two things don't sort of reconcile to each other. How many of you all are working in spreadsheets? Right. I can guarantee you your spreadsheet and the story it tells does not match the story that one of your colleagues is using, right, inside of their Excel spreadsheet. And so when you orient towards this very sort of top-line metric and then work your way down, not only are you ensuring accuracy and consistency and all of those other things, but you're also ensuring that you're all allied around the same goal, which is to increase your revenue, to increase your profit. So you might say to yourself, well, that's all very, fine and dandy, but we already have a ton of data, and we've got 10 tools, and they all, my Google AdWords conversions don't match my analytics conversions, don't match my Omniture conversions, don't match what I have in my database, and all of that good stuff. And I'm here to argue to you that it's very important that you do a data audit. It is not sexy, it is not fun, it's not the thing you run to your boss and say, hey, Monday, let's do a data audit. This is gonna be the thing that doubles our revenue. I know, but I sat at dinner yesterday with somebody who had just joined a company I believe as a product manager, and he said, we have great analytics, but I don't know if it's telling me the truth or not. How is he supposed to do his job, right? So at the very least, it's important that, and we're going to use ourselves as a case study in this in a second, but it's very important that everybody knows how you're defining a metric. What's revenue? Is it gross revenue? Is it gross of shipping? Is it gross of discounts? I mean, what's your revenue metric, right? Is that same metric the same across all the different departments? Because the sales folks may want to take credit for the full top line thing, but the financial people might be thinking about it a very different way. And finally, again, are you using all of those reports that you're running? Are they worth your time? Are they actually part of the story that you're trying to tell for your business? So as an example, this is one of our customers that's in the e-commerce space, and they start out with that same sort of revenue top-line understanding, and they break it down by new versus repeat. But then when they go into, it's a little tough to read here, but when they go into analyzing even just the marketing campaign performance, you'll see that they have a ton of different dashboards, each for the different channels, because those different pieces make up the overall thing. And they've done the work to make sure that when you sum up all the orders and all the revenue across all of these different marketing channel-related campaign dashboards, it actually adds up to the original revenue for the company. And that's important, right? Because if you're going to be doing campaign optimization, you want to make sure that you're not all optimizing campaigns that don't actually add up to what your business's total metric is. And so even here, when they look at their flash sales, I believe this is for one of our flash sale customers, they look at that flash sale performance by the revenue, in terms of revenue by source, but then they're breaking that down because there's inputs. I think it was, I forget who it was today, I believe, who was talking about inputs and outputs. So they're looking at that marketing campaign performance by the inputs to that. So what was the spend on that? What was the revenue to that? What were the, what were the products that were involved in that? Understanding all the inputs that tell the story of that particular campaign, and that campaign is part of a larger story. And I encourage you not to work from the bottom up, even though it's super easy to just look at it inside of AdWords or Facebook advertising or wherever and understand your individual campaigns. I encourage you, again, to start at the top and work yourself down. So we actually had to go through this as a business recently. So we're about 5, 6 years old, theoretically a data-driven company. I will tell you that we have long ways to go in becoming more data-driven. But we had gotten to the point where inside of our own tool set, we had gotten to the point where there was no universal way of naming things. How many of you guys have a standard practice for how to name your UTM parameters? Oh, yeah. Not 4, 5 people, I think, raised their hands. So we had a similar problem. It's not related to the UTM parameters, but we had 16 different revenue metrics. We're a SaaS business with subscription revenue. We don't need 16 different ways to talk about our revenue, right? So no universal nomenclature. And we see this with our e-commerce companies that come in and say, well, I don't know who created all these campaigns because I don't know what they mean because somebody just, like the intern created the UTM parameters. And oh yes, they used the Google URL generator, but there was no consistency around how to use the Google URL generator. We didn't have a single source of truth. We had no audit process. We had no methodology for how we're going to segment the customers. What does it mean to be a new customer? What does it mean to be a repeat customer? Is ever having come back a repeat customer? And also, who was in charge of deciding what was the final answer for any particular data question? And if you don't have these processes built in, you end up with a big bowl of spaghetti. So recently, we went through this whole process, and we created an internal analytics team, which, isn't that many people, but is somebody who's extremely anal and extremely detail-oriented and went about the process of understanding what every one of these different sort of metrics and dimensions, et cetera, meant and kind of cleaned it all up. So what did we do? We went from, I didn't do the reverse math, but we were able to delete roughly 25%, maybe more, of all of the charts that we had in our business, that people across a 115-person company were actively using every day but making the wrong decisions because those things all didn't reconcile with each other, right? And again, I go back to saying this is not very sexy, but if you don't do these data audits, you're working with crap. And that means your decisions are crappy as well. And your decision may only be right now thinking about conversion rates, which I'm going to argue against in a second, but even your conversion rate decision will be wrong. In our system, because we have a data warehouse, how many of you guys are working with some sort of data warehouse? Okay, so actually maybe even just a quarter of you. So, for us, the faster the update, the faster we have the data inside of our hands. And by going through this exercise, we were able to reduce our update time or improve it by 70%, which means that we're able to make even closer to real-time decisions about our business. And that is really, really important in a startup business that is growing as quickly as we are, as many of our customers are, as many of you are and your customers. So the next principle of a really good data workflow that we find across our customers is look at things horizontally, run your data horizontally, and execute vertically. Look, teams are great. You need teams to be able to focus and achieve objectives and whatnot. But if you're looking at your business health by any individual team, you're doing the wrong thing. So if you're marketing, so we've got a sales team, a marketing team, a customer success team, which is my team. And if the marketing folks are evaluating everything they're doing by the number of leads they generate, but don't pay attention to whether sales thought they were good leads, and far more important to me, whether I thought those customers that they were able to bring in, convert, were actually good margin customers, and the right kind of people to work with on a daily basis, we're all working in silos. Right? So your marketing team, if you're running a subscription-based business, your marketing team should be looking not just for new customers, but for customers who stay on subscription for more number of months. That's a KPI that comes to you months down the road. But that is what your marketing team should be looking. So before I jump into that, how many of you guys look at your the campaign ROI based on that first order and like how that first order performs? Okay. What do the rest of you look at it by? Are you looking at it? Here to make the case that you should stop looking at your, or you should stop only looking at your campaign performance by that first order that you get through the first conversion, right? Because if you look at this, here's one of our customers that I think is in the fashion e-commerce space. So that first number there is what the ROI of that campaign is if you just analyze based on the first order. And you can see that it looks like it's performing, well, you turn that campaign off, right? But if you look at the last column, that's the ROI using the customer's LTV. And in fact, if you evaluated all those campaigns based upon what the initial conversion rate was and what the average order value of those first orders was, you would have turned this campaign off quite a bit ago and kept other ones that actually, over the long run, perform worse than this campaign. And the thing about this is analysis you all can go home and do in your, so many of you live in spreadsheets, you can all go home and do this right away and start making smarter decisions, right? Because you have all of your customer information in your databases, you have your orders in your database, you can understand what their lifetime value is, and you can analyze what that originating campaign is. And when you mix that up, I guarantee you that the campaigns you think are great for you are not that great for you. Not that getting initial conversions isn't a good thing, but analyzing solely based on that and congratulating yourselves as conversion optimizers solely based on that is a bad idea, right? And we see this time and time again across e-commerce businesses, across SaaS businesses, everybody. How many of you guys take into account cost of goods sold or margin or something like that when you do your analysis for campaign optimization? Again, just about a handful. They said point at that. Ooh. All right. So how many of you guys look at it based on returns? Okay. So as we all know, when you look inside of Google Analytics and you look at your e-commerce data, you can understand what campaigns performed and which ones got you better conversion rates and higher average order values and et cetera. But guess what? 99% of the people that at least we work with are not feeding back in returns and exchanges into Google Analytics. So if you even have like a 6% return rate, which is not unheard of, all your data in e-commerce inside of GA is just wrong for making decisions. And so what you can also do on Monday is go back and reconcile your campaign, your first order conversions with based on returns, right? So if you think a particular product does really well for converting customers, that may be true, but if that product gets returned at 4x the rate of another product, then is that really a good campaign? It may or may not be. It may have other value, but you ought to be looking at it in terms of returns, exchanges, et cetera. And here we can see that in terms of the same thing, and I think this one actually looks at it by cost of goods sold, if I'm not mistaken. But we see that a campaign, if you just look at it without considering things like margin impact, it looks like it's got an ROI of 29%. But when you consider things like margin, it's got a negative ROI. It flips to the other direction, right? And this isn't like crazy data science. This isn't like you don't need statistical background to do this data. You just have all this data sitting inside of your servers. You just need to be able to leverage it, right? And so this is part of that principle of analyzing globally from end to end, not just from where they came from and how much it cost you to get that eyeball, not just whether they converted and how much they purchased with, but exactly, did they keep that purchase? Did they buy an item that gives you good margins or bad margins, right? And finally, if you are working with any sort of lead generation type of business, this particular one is related to utilizing Pardot to analyze, to track and analyze your leads. And so this was for a customer of ours that had put so much effort into their Pardot score. Right, so they're scoring their leads as they come in, and many people score leads. You don't have to use a sophisticated tool like Pardot to do that, but you're coming up with some way of saying it's a good lead or it's a bad lead. But again, if you do that analysis based purely on whether they actually converted or not, or even so this is for a subscription-based business, and they've got multiple tiers of pricing, and if you do that analysis again solely based on, they bought tier 3 versus tier 1, my score is correct. Again, that's a myopic view of how to analyze conversions and how to optimize your business. Because when we look at this particular company, we see that customers, so the higher the score, the better, so that customers with a Pardot score of 75 have, an average, so they've gotten, let's see here, 3,800 new accounts and 340 conversions, let alone kind of what the lifetime value and all of that is, but you've got that there. And so you think, wow, great, so higher score, we got real conversions, that seems like a big number and all of that good stuff. But what you actually see is that people with the PAR.DOT score of 0, there's more conversions there, more accounts and more conversions there. So the higher the score, the better the customer, right? So what this customer went off and did was say, okay, we need to rethink our whole scoring algorithm because their sales teams, their marketing teams, et cetera, were based around prioritizing that customers with higher lead scores should have more time spent with them. That's not actually what the data is saying, right? Again, reformulating this does require a little bit of math background, but running this analysis to validate whether your scoring algorithm is the right one or is accurate or not is not. Right? Anybody can, you all can run this type of analysis inside of your own business, again, easily in Excel. And lastly, many of you talked about being on the business side of things. Lucas raised his hand for both the business and the analyst side. But look, in a lot of organizations, there is some sort of analytics team that's full of like the math brains, the statistics brains, et cetera. And there's some other team that's like running the business, right? Or launching marketing campaigns or managing the product or something like that. And the problem is that, at least this is what we see a lot happen, is that your people that are sort of in charge of running the business or figuring out how to optimize KPIs and that sort of thing, they can often be terrible question askers of the analyst team, right? We'll talk through a few different examples of that. They either ask questions that are way too general and are going to obviously lead to disappointment, or way too specific because they're too smart for their own good, or sometimes it's like Goldilocks, they're just right. But every one of the people in these groups has some specific talent. So your marketers are really good at leveraging those tactics, trying to understand broader industry principles around what's working in the market or what the best practices around trying to get the customer, convert the customer, come to conferences like this, right? And then on the analyst side, well, that I don't know R, but that's a skill. In fact, at the table last night, people were talking about how hard it is to find people with specific skills. And these kinds of specific skills. These are two very valuable traits that all put together in a good way, in a good cooperative way, lead you to actually optimizing the one KPI that we believe matters, which is revenue. And so how do you sort of come to a middle ground where the strengths of both are leveraged and no one's sort of overstepping their bounds and trying to get too cute about what they're asking for? So here's an example of somebody. A marketer came and said, so there was a chart, and we have a chart inside their account, and it was something about like, what's the number of months to their second order? And so this is done by analyzing properties at the order level for all the customers to basically to figure out how many months till the next order. And so this person, a marketer, not understanding the properties of data, came along and asked for, not the properties of data, really the properties of math, came along and said, oh, I want to rerun this analysis, but they basically wanted to do it that would take out they wanted to filter the data set that would take out some of the properties that made the math work in the first place. So basically what they asked for would have influenced the probabilities that were going into calculating this, right? And so what we then got around to doing, basically the analyst team and this marketer, let's talk about this. Let's figure out whether that's something that you really need, why this doesn't actually work from a math perspective, right? And they were just trying to get to the point of saying, what they were really asking is, do customers who purchase item A in their first order have more frequent purchasing cycles than customers who purchase item B? And that's a totally awesome question, right? Because if you're trying to speed up the rate at which you get repeat orders, do certain products influence that? And that's a great analysis to run, but the wrong way that they asked it is they sent in, this request that was like very specific. Can you rewrite the query to remove blah, 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 and that's an example of a way too specific question being asked by someone who doesn't actually know how to work with the data, right? So we're going to dig a little bit into free shipping here, but we had this example of, on the other side of things, a customer asking a very general question. I kid you not, the customer came to their account manager and said, I want to increase my revenue. Okay. We're not a professional services team. We do offer professional services, but they weren't engaged in professional services with us. They just literally came to the account manager and said, yeah, I want to increase my revenue. The account manager's like, okay, that's a really big question. So does every one of our other customers. Let's think about how to narrow this down a bit, right? And so the account manager in this situation, which I think can be the analyst in you or whatever, said, well, have you looked at where are the opportunities for growth, right? From our perspective, we're trying to understand how to help our customers without, unless they're engaged with us in professional services, without taking on, a 3-month engagement to dig into their data on their behalf and do the work for them, right? So there's certain tricks that work that a lot of companies that haven't done. I mean, Brooks talked about how the very large companies are very new to conversion optimization. The large companies we work with, the small startups that are really, data savvy and analytics driven and all of that, and are also in some ways very new to all of this. And so where this led to was an exercise around saying, let's increase the average order value. And we're going to dig into free shipping in a second here, but what you can see is that, here, let me try to help clarify this a little bit. The left-hand column talks about free shipping. So how many of you guys have free shipping on one of your customer sites? Okay. So how many of you guys have optimized that free shipping? Okay. So many of our customers that are in the e-commerce space offer free shipping, and little to none of them have thought about why they set the particular threshold that they set, right? And so for this particular customer, they ran we could call it a test, ran a test where on the left side, they looked at it with a $65 free shipping minimum. The middle one's a $49 free shipping, and the leftmost one is $59 free shipping. And what you see here, that second row of numbers, the big numbers, is that the one with the higher free shipping threshold actually had a higher AOV. Right? It had the highest AOV. And there's a lot of counterintuitive stuff that goes into it, but trust me when I say the data's right here. And actually, what's even more interesting is that this had all the conversion optimizers, and you might say, well, did conversion rates go down? Right? But no, actually they didn't. They were, in some cases, double the conversion rates of the others. And there's some nuances for their business that have this make sense, but my point is that when you have this very general question of help me increase my revenue, and you're in the task, as many of you are, to kind of get to that next step to prove value, to generate excitement around data and analytics-based testing and all of that, looking for some things that may work, things that have not been optimized can often work, right? So if no one's taken a look at free shipping, the chances are that it's worthy of optimization. And in this particular case, it did, increase their business by quite a bit as well. So let's dig a little bit into free shipping, because I think why did we come to this? Why did we at RG Metrics come to this idea that free shipping was a good place to explore? It's really because internally our business people and our data science people came together and said, what are those things that we could do that many of our customers could leverage, right? So we combined the brains of the data scientists and we combined the brains of the marketers who say, yeah, free shipping, they're always experimenting with free shipping. Then their ad copy, lowering the threshold, hiring the thresholds. Not necessarily all they're looking at is conversion rates, but the data scientists, well, we could actually do this in a smarter way. And so, many of you know this, right? So if your free shipping threshold is too low, then your customers aren't sort of motivated to reach for that higher threshold. And if your free shipping threshold is too high, then you've got something that many people aren't going to reach for, right? But again, if it's just right, then you see something like this, where you motivate enough people to buy at that higher rate without sacrificing conversion. And what does that mean? That usually means higher average order values, which at least make that customer more profitable. And then you could run the analysis around whether the things that they're buying by buying at a higher threshold are actually producing more profit for your business. But that can be the next order exercise. And so here's a customer who you can see here on the x-axis is what the order value was, and on the y-axis is the percentage of orders that came along at those different order values, the percentage of orders, I'm sorry. And so this is before free shipping, and this is after free shipping, right? So there was a 15% increase in that order amount. This is a thing that you can go off and go do next week, but the thing that one of the reasons that we incorporate this here is because it leverages the things that make marketers excited or business owners excited around shipping and around coupons and discounts and all that. You can do this for discounts, you can do this for free shipping. I mean, you can do this for so many different things, but it also leverages the importance of what we've been talking about of data-driven hypotheses. And so if you don't know, if you're in the position of trying to come up with a discount strategy and don't know how to do so, we'll talk with the data people. Because there's often very, interesting algorithms or interesting formulas that they can apply that will help you do your job better. And it's about those two people coming together in a way that cooperates and leverages the best of both worlds. And finally, once in a while we do get a well-framed question that we can answer in a pretty easily. And so here was somebody who was again having an e-commerce business that has lots of daily fluctuations, and they were running this analysis over year, but the previous year. And that was finding that they found that to be providing them sort of a little bit too much variability in their business. And despite the fact that it was a robust business with plenty of data, it was just too disruptive to all sorts of optimizers, the retention marketers, the acquisition folks, et cetera. And so what they said is, what's a better way to do this? And that's a good question, and for them, our answer was, look at the 28-day average, right? Look at it as a rolling average and compare yourself to that 28-day average. So for all of you that are thinking about how do I optimize, think about asking good questions of your data scientist, or vice versa. If you're a data scientist and you're trying to push forward business optimization, think about framing things in a way that your business folks or your marketing folks or whomever it is, your agency, whatever, can actually understand. And finally, use data to focus your effort. So I recently did a webinar with WordStream, and I found this slide fascinating. So they have thousands of clients, really big ones, and they do SEO and SEM for them. And so they ran this analysis across all of their customers and saw that 80% of their customers' traffic was going to the top 10% of landing pages, right? So when you think about doing landing page optimization and utilizing all those great tips that we got yesterday, focus your efforts on the right set of landing pages. So often we see people try to go and make consistent changes across all landing pages, or narrowly think about based on a particular paid campaign. Look at your data to figure out where you should spend your effort, because honestly, none of us have enough time to do all the optimization ideas that we have. And so again, when we talk about data-driven hypotheses, use data to drive that which you're even going to create a hypothesis around. And that's what this is trying to say to you, is that just a small percentage of the catalog of pages that you could be optimizing are really worth your time. So finally, I like to say data isn't sexy, it isn't magic, it does still require people to do things right. And so when you think about doing any of the kinds of analyses that I've talked about, or that you're looking to do that leverage data in a more holistic way, and don't just focus on that one conversion metric, the goal conversion rate, or whatever it is, this stuff is important. If you're using Google Analytics, force UTM tracking, force good UTM tracking. I cannot tell you how many people come to us and say, I want to understand lifetime value from all my campaigns, but the campaign names and, so they've got FB ad, Facebook _ad. They've got all this crap in their UTM parameter data, and that's the first step. You've got to actually, well, that ends up being their first step with us, is that we've got to actually cleanse all this stuff. But you can do good going forward. In our marketing team, it's like there's a UTM Nazi who makes sure that, all of those things are properly tagged. Clean up all of your unused stuff. So if you've got good data hygiene inside of GA or whatever tools you're using is really important. Don't just accept that when you see things that don't make any sense, that's okay. Some kind of traffic is generating that event to be called inside of your Google Analytics, and if you don't understand why that's happening, you should be cleaning that up. You got to have your key relationships in place. And what I mean here is the way that we're able to connect up your ESP data, your ERP data, your ad platform data, your database data, all that stuff is by having key relationships in place. So if you are running an e-commerce shop and you're not properly storing all the SKU level information, or if you don't have a user ID, I can't tell you how many people come in and they don't have a user ID inside of their ERP system. I don't know. They just have the shipping information, right? That makes it a little bit challenging. It can be done, but it's going to have more error than if you could have just stored a user ID. So having those key relationship is important. And I think that especially given how many of you said you're kind of in the small to medium-sized space, you're constantly going to, well, as you grow, you're certainly probably going to be outgrowing the tools that you have. And as you do that, it is so important to save or migrate that data, because the the data is wealth, and the data that you're collecting today is gold for you to mine, not just today, not just tomorrow, but years from now, because it understands how your own business has changed, but also how your tactics have influenced the performance of your business. And finally, I think Brian said this earlier, you have to, or no, maybe it was Brooks, you have to be open to being wrong. And I know so many of you guys are in the services space, optimizing for other customers, but it truly is the case that when you have a data-driven hypothesis and it doesn't actually work out the way that you think, if you take ownership for that, it really does build trust with the customers that you want to keep. The people who get really upset about that aren't the customers you want to keep. Right? Questions?
Thank you very much.